The stars had been singing their ancient songs for billions of years when Earth finally learned to listen. In the great emptiness of space, civilizations older than mountains ruled over worlds that humans could not even imagine. They called themselves the Galactic Confederacy, and they had been the masters of space for longer than Earth had existed. The Zephyrians were the first to build cities among the stars. Their sleek ships had crossed between worlds for 50,000 years. They looked like tall, thin humans, but with silver skin that reflected light like mirrors. Their voices sounded like wind through crystal caves, and they spoke in whispers that could be heard across entire star systems. The Vorth were even older. These beings were made of living crystal that grew and changed shape as they thought. They had no bodies like humans understood bodies. Instead, they were walking mountains of clear stone that pulsed with inner light. The Vorth remembered when the galaxy was young and hot, when new stars were born every day like flowers in spring. Then there were the Nethic, creatures of gas and energy that lived in the spaces between worlds. They had no solid form at all, but danced through the void, like living storms. The Nethic claimed they were older than matter itself, that they had watched the first atoms come together to make the first worlds. These ancient races and dozens of others ruled the galaxy from the great station called Unity Prime. It was a massive structure built inside a hollow moon, big enough to hold 1 million beings from every corner of space. The Council of Ancients met there in a chamber carved from a single piece of star metal, where decisions were made that affected the lives of trillions. For thousands of generations, the Confederacy had grown slowly and carefully. New members were rare. Most species that developed space travel were watched for centuries before being invited to join. The Council believed that only civilizations that had proven themselves over vast amounts of time could be trusted with the responsibility of galactic citizenship. Then Earth sent its message to the stars. The transmission was crude and simple compared to the elegant communications the Confederacy was used to receiving. It came from a small blue world in a quiet arm of the galaxy, a place so far from the centers of civilization that most maps did not even mark it. The message was short and direct in a way that made the ancient beings uncomfortable. "This is Earth calling. We come in peace. We want to learn and trade with other worlds. Please respond." The Council of Ancients met for 3 full months to discuss this unexpected contact. The Zephyrians argued that any species so young could not possibly be ready for galactic society. The Vorth calculated that humans had only been using metal tools for a few thousand years, which was barely an instant in their long view of time. The Nethic whispered that these creatures from Earth were so new that they still smelled of the dirt they had crawled from, but there were rules even for the ancient races. Any species that achieved faster than light travel on their own had the right to request membership in the Confederacy. It did not matter if they were ready or not. The law was older than most of the civilizations that followed it. So the Council sent a reply to Earth, though they took their time doing it. 6 months passed before the response reached the small blue world. By Confederacy standards, this was lightning-fast communication. By human standards, it was an eternity of waiting. "People of Earth," the message began, "the Galactic Confederacy acknowledges your request for contact. You will be granted probationary membership status pending evaluation of your species' maturity and development. Report to Unity Prime for processing." The coordinates came with the message, along with basic star charts and a warning that Earth would be held responsible for any damage their primitive technology might cause to more advanced civilizations. Captain Sarah Chun read the message for the 20th time as she stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance. The ship was humanity's pride, the fastest and most advanced vessel they had ever built. To Sarah, it represented everything humans could achieve when they worked together toward a common goal. To the rest of the galaxy, it would probably look like a child's toy. Sarah was 35 years old, which made her middle-aged by human standards but practically an infant by galactic ones. She had grown up dreaming of the stars, reading every book she could find about space exploration. When humanity finally developed faster-than-light travel, she had been among the first to volunteer for deep space missions. The Defiance was not a large ship. It carried a crew of only 200 people, but each one had been chosen carefully. They were scientists, diplomats, engineers, and explorers. Their mission was simple in theory but complex in practice: make contact with galactic civilization and establish Earth as a legitimate member of the interstellar community. "Captain," called Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb from his station. Marcus was Sarah's second-in-command and oldest friend. They had served together for 8 years, through training missions around Earth's solar system and the first tentative flights to nearby stars. "We are approaching the Unity Prime system. Long-range sensors are picking up massive energy signatures." Sarah nodded and walked to the main viewscreen. What she saw there took her breath away. Unity Prime was not just a station, but an entire artificial world. Thousands of ships moved around it like insects around a glowing flower. Some of the vessels were so large that they could have carried Earth's entire population. Others were so strange in design that Sarah could not even tell which end was the front. "Communications incoming," reported Ensign Patricia Valdez, the ship's communication officer. "They are requesting our identification and purpose." "Open a channel," Sarah ordered. She straightened her uniform and tried to look as professional as possible. This was humanity's first impression on the galactic stage, and she wanted to make it count. The viewscreen flickered and showed a being that Sarah assumed was Zephyrian. The creature was tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Its eyes were large and dark, and when it spoke, its voice had a musical quality that was both beautiful and slightly unsettling. "Primitive vessel, this is Unity Prime Traffic Control. State your business in Confederacy space." Sarah felt her jaw tighten at the word primitive, but she kept her voice calm and professional. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth. Ship Defiance. We are here in response to the Confederacy's invitation to establish diplomatic relations." Zephyrian's expression did not change, but Sarah thought she detected a hint of amusement in its large eyes. "Ah yes, the probationary members from the young world. You will dock at Station 7, Level 9. Do not deviate from the prescribed flight path. Do not attempt to scan any Confederacy vessels. Do not activate any weapon systems. Failure to comply will result in immediate destruction." The channel closed before Sarah could respond. She looked around the bridge at her crew, all of whom were staring at the viewscreen with expressions ranging from anger to disbelief. "Friendly bunch?" Marcus muttered under his breath. "They are just being cautious," Sarah replied, though she did not really believe it. "We are strangers here. They do not know what to expect from us." The flight to Station 7 took 2 hours, during which the Defiance was escorted by a pair of Confederacy patrol ships. The vessels were sleek and beautiful, clearly built by beings who valued art as much as function. They moved through space with a grace that made the human ship look clumsy by comparison. Station 7 turned out to be a massive docking facility on the outer edge of Unity Prime. As the Defiance approached its assigned berth, Sarah could see dozens of other ships from species she had never imagined. There were vessels that looked like living creatures, ships made of what appeared to be solid light, and craft so alien in design that she could not even guess how they moved through space. The docking process was handled entirely by automated systems. Mechanical arms reached out from the station and gently guided the Defiance into its berth. As soon as the ship was secured, the station's computer began running detailed scans of the human vessel. "They are examining every inch of our ship," reported Chief Engineer Torres from his station. "Structural analysis, weapon systems, power plant, even our food storage. It is like they are cataloging us." "Let them look," Sarah said. "We have nothing to hide." But as she watched the scan results scroll across her screens, Sarah began to understand what was really happening. The Confederacy was not just examining their ship for security purposes. They were evaluating humanity's technology, determining exactly how primitive their new probationary members really were. An hour later, a delegation of Confederacy officials arrived at the docking tube. Sarah and Marcus went to meet them, along with Dr. Elizabeth Harrison, Earth's best xenobiologist, and Ambassador James Wright, a diplomat with decades of experience in difficult negotiations. The delegation consisted of 3 beings from different species. The leader was a Zephyrian who introduced himself as Administrator Zelf. He was accompanied by a Vorth whose crystal body hummed with inner energy, and a creature that Sarah did not recognize, but that seemed to be made of flowing water held together by some kind of force field. "Welcome to Unity Prime," Administrator Zelf said in his musical voice. "I am here to explain your status as probationary members and the restrictions that apply to your species." He handed Sarah a datapad containing what appeared to be a very long list of rules and regulations. As she scanned through it, her heart sank. Humans were forbidden from entering most areas of Confederacy space. They could not trade in advanced technologies. They could not participate in council meetings except as observers. They could not even communicate directly with most member species without permission from their sponsors. "These restrictions seem quite severe," Ambassador Wright said carefully. "How long will they remain in effect?" The Vorth crystal being pulsed with what might have been amusement. When it spoke, its voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "Your species will be evaluated every 50 standard years. If you show sufficient progress, some restrictions may be lifted. Full membership typically requires a minimum of 500 years of probationary status." 500 years? Dr. Harrison could not keep the shock out of her voice. "But our entire recorded history is less than that." "Exactly," Administrator Zelf replied. "You are a very young species. The Confederacy has learned from experience that young civilizations are unpredictable and often dangerous. These restrictions are for your own protection as much as ours." Sarah felt anger building in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. "What kind of progress would be required for us to advance our status?" "You must demonstrate cultural maturity," the water being answered in a voice like rushing streams. "You must show that you have moved beyond the primitive impulses of violence, territorial expansion, and resource competition. You must prove that you can think beyond the immediate needs of your own species." As the delegation continued to explain humanity's place in the galactic order, Sarah began to understand the true nature of their situation. The Confederacy did not see humans as potential equals or partners. They saw them as children who needed to be watched and controlled until they grew up enough to be trusted with real responsibility. The ancient races had forgotten what it was like to be young and hungry and full of dreams. They had grown comfortable in their power and convinced themselves that age automatically brought wisdom. They looked at humanity's short history and saw only primitiveness, never stopping to consider that being young might also mean being energetic, innovative, and unbound by the weight of tradition. But Sarah and her crew were about to show the galaxy that sometimes the young have advantages that the old have forgotten. Sometimes being new to the game means playing by different rules. And sometimes the student has lessons to teach the master. The meeting ended with the Confederacy officials assigning the Defiance to what they called safe sectors, areas of space that the ancient races considered worthless because they contained no valuable resources or strategic importance. It was busy work designed to keep the humans occupied while preventing them from interfering with more important activities. As Sarah watched the delegation leave her ship, she made a silent promise. Humanity would prove itself worthy of respect, but they would do it on their own terms. The galaxy was about to learn that Earth's children had grown up faster and stronger than anyone expected. And when the time came to show their true strength, the old races would discover that they had seriously underestimated the young world that dared to reach for the stars. 3 months had passed since the Defiance left Unity Prime. Captain Sarah Chun stood in her ready room, staring at the star charts that showed their assigned patrol route. The Confederacy had given humanity access to what they called the Outer Rim sectors, areas of space so far from civilization that most species had forgotten they existed. The ancient races believed these regions held nothing of value. They were wrong. "Captain, you need to see this," Marcus Webb's voice came through the communication system. There was excitement in his tone that Sarah had not heard since they left Earth. Sarah made her way to the bridge quickly. The crew was gathered around the main sensor station, all talking at once. Dr. Harrison was running calculations on her tablet, while Chief Torres examined the engineering readings with wide eyes. "Report," Sarah ordered, and the bridge fell silent. Marcus pointed to the main view screen, which showed a massive nebula stretching across millions of kilometers of space. The gas clouds swirled in beautiful patterns of blue, green, and gold. But that was not what had caught the crew's attention. Long-range sensors detected an artificial structure inside the Kepler Nebula, Marcus explained. The computer ran the signature through our databases 3 times to be sure. "Captain, it is a ship, but not like anything we have ever seen before." Dr. Harrison looked up from her tablet. "The energy readings are incredible. Whatever it is, it has been there for a very long time. Thousands of years, maybe longer. The metal composition does not match any known Confederacy technology." Sarah felt her heart start to beat faster. In all their months of exploring the worthless sectors, they had found nothing but empty space and dead rocks. Now they had discovered something that might be truly important. "Could it be a derelict?" she asked. "The ship appears to be powered down but intact," Torres reported. "No life signs, but the hull is still sound. Whatever built it knew how to make things that last." Sarah walked closer to the view screen. The nebula was beautiful but dangerous. The radiation levels would make it difficult for most ships to operate inside for long periods. That might explain why the Confederacy had never found this vessel before. "Set course for the nebula," she ordered. "But keep us at a safe distance until we know what we are dealing with." The Defiance moved carefully into the outer edges of the gas cloud. The ship's shields glowed as they deflected cosmic radiation and charged particles. On the view screen, the mysterious vessel grew larger and more detailed. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the Defiance. The hull was made of a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols covered its surface, carved deep into the armor plating. The design was unlike anything in the Confederacy databases. "Captain," Ensign Valdez called from her station, "I am detecting faint power readings from the vessel. Something is still active over there?" Dr. Harrison was practically bouncing with excitement. "Do you realize what this could be? The design, the age, the technology. This might be a Forerunner ship." The bridge fell completely silent. Everyone knew about the Forerunners, though most people believed they were just legends. According to galactic mythology, they were an ancient race that had transcended physical existence millions of years ago. Before they vanished, they had built wonders that made current technology look like stone tools. Finding a real Forerunner ship would be the archaeological discovery of the century. It would revolutionize understanding of galactic history and technology. Most importantly for humanity, it would prove that Earth's explorers could accomplish things that the ancient races had failed to do. "Launch a probe," Sarah ordered. "Full sensor sweep. I want to know everything about that ship before we get any closer." The probe launched and moved carefully toward the derelict vessel. Its sensors began transmitting detailed information about the hull composition, internal structure, and energy patterns. What they found was beyond anything they had imagined. The ship was not just old, it was impossibly advanced. The metal it was made from was stronger than anything in the Confederacy database. The power source was still functioning after thousands of years, using principles that human science could barely understand. And the internal compartments showed signs of technology that defied current physical laws. "This is it," Dr. Harrison whispered. "This is really a Forerunner ship. We have found something that will change everything." Sarah was about to order a full investigation when Ensign Valdez spoke up from her station. "Captain, I am detecting multiple ships approaching from outside the nebula. They are big, and they are coming fast." The view screen switched to show long-range sensors. 5 massive vessels were moving toward the nebula at high speed. Even at this distance, their design was unmistakable. They were Zephyrian battlecruisers. How did they find us so quickly? Marcus asked. They must have been monitoring our communications, Torres replied grimly. Standard procedure for probationary members. Sarah felt cold anger building in her chest. The Confederacy had been watching them, waiting to see if humanity would find anything interesting. Now that the Defiance had made the discovery of a lifetime, the ancient races were moving in to claim it for themselves. Incoming transmission, Valdez reported. The view screen showed the bridge of the lead Zephyrian ship. The being who appeared was tall and imposing, with silver skin that seemed to glow with inner light. His uniform was covered with decorations that marked him as a high-ranking military officer. Human vessel, he said in the musical Zephyrian language. I am Admiral Keffer of the Confederacy fleet. You will withdraw from this area immediately. Sarah stepped forward. This is Captain Chen of the UES Defiance. We are operating within our assigned sector under Confederacy law. We have the right to investigate any discoveries we make. Admiral Keffer's expression showed what might have been amusement. Young species, you do not understand the situation. The vessel you have discovered is of significant archaeological importance. Under Section 847 of the Galactic Heritage Code, all Forerunner artifacts must be claimed by the senior civilization present. Senior civilization? Sarah felt her anger growing. What gives you the right to steal our discovery? The right of age, Keffer replied coldly. The Zephyrian Empire has existed for 50,000 years. Your species has barely learned to leave its home planet. This artifact will be properly studied by beings who have the wisdom and experience to understand its importance. Dr. Harrison moved to stand beside Sarah. With respect, Admiral, this discovery was made by human sensors in a sector assigned to human exploration. International salvage law should apply here. Your primitive laws have no authority in this matter, Keffer said. You will withdraw to a safe distance while we secure the artifact. Any attempt to interfere will be considered an act of aggression. The transmission ended. On the view screen, the Zephyrian ships were moving into attack formation around the nebula. Their weapon systems were powering up, and their shields were beginning to glow with energy. They are actually going to steal it, Marcus said in disbelief. They are going to take our discovery, and there is nothing we can do about it. Sarah stared at the Zephyrian ships. The Defiance was outnumbered 5-1 by vessels that were much larger and more heavily armed. In a straight fight, humanity's first deep spaceship would be destroyed in minutes, but Sarah Shun had not come this far to back down from a fight, especially when the fight was over something that belonged to her crew by right of discovery. All hands, this is the captain, she announced over the ship's communication system. We have made the greatest archaeological discovery in galactic history. An alien force is trying to steal it from us using threats and superior firepower. I want everyone to know that we are not going to let that happen. She turned to Marcus. Signal the Zephyrian ships. Tell them we refuse to withdraw. Captain, Dr. Harrison said quietly, they will destroy us. Maybe, Sarah replied. But sometimes standing up for what is right is more important than survival. If we back down now, humanity will never be respected in this galaxy. We will always be the young species that runs away when the older children want our toys. The response came quickly. Admiral Keffer appeared on the view screen again, and this time his expression showed real anger. Captain Chin, you are making a serious mistake. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. We claim this discovery under human law, Sarah replied firmly. We will not abandon our find to thieves who use age as an excuse for robbery. Keffer's silver skin seemed to darken. Very well, you have chosen your fate. The transmission ended. A moment later, the lead Zephyrian ship fired a blast of energy that passed just over the Defiance's hull. The shot was a warning, but it was close enough to make the human ship shake from the energy discharge. Warning shot, Marcus reported. They are trying to scare us off. Hold position, Sarah ordered. Continue scanning the Forerunner ship. We came here to make discoveries, and that is what we are going to do. The second shot was closer. It passed just meters from the Defiance's starboard side, close enough to overload several sensor panels. The bridge lights flickered as the ship's systems dealt with the electromagnetic pulse. "Captain," Torres called from his station, "if they keep shooting that close, they are going to hit us by accident." Sarah was about to respond when the third shot struck the Defiance directly. The blast tore through the ship's hull like it was made of paper. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the vessel as atmosphere began venting into space. The lights went out on half the bridge, and several crew members were thrown to the floor. "Damage report!" Sarah shouted over the noise. "Hull. Breach on deck 7, Torres replied, his voice tight with shock. "Emergency bulkheads are sealing, but we have lost life support to that entire section." Dr. Harrison was helping Ensign Valdez, who had been thrown against her console and was bleeding from a head wound. "Medical teams to deck 7 immediately," she called. But Sarah knew it was too late for some of her crew. Deck 7 contained the ship's secondary computer core and several laboratories. 12 people had been working in that section when the Zephyrian shot tore through the hull. Marcus was checking his console with shaking hands. "Captain, deck 7 is completely sealed off. No life signs. They are all gone." Sarah felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. Commander Marcus Webb was more than her second in command. He was her oldest friend. They had served together for 8 years through training missions and exploration flights. He had been the one person she could always count on. Now he was dead, killed by aliens who thought humans were too young and primitive to deserve respect. The Zephyrian ships moved closer to the nebula, ignoring the crippled human vessel. Admiral Kethver's ships began deploying salvage equipment toward the Forerunner derelict, preparing to claim it as their prize. But Kethver had made a mistake that would cost him everything. He had underestimated what humans were capable of when they were pushed too far. He had killed Sarah's crew and stolen their discovery, then left them to die in the radiation storms of the nebula. What he did not understand was that he had just declared war on a species that had climbed to the top of their world's food chain by being the most dangerous predators their planet had ever produced. He had shed human blood and left witnesses to tell the story. Sarah Chen stared at the Zephyrian ships through the viewscreen as her crew fought to repair their damaged vessel. She was no longer thinking about diplomacy or following Confederacy rules. She was thinking about justice and revenge and showing the galaxy that humanity was not as helpless as everyone believed. The ancient races thought they could push the young species around because humans were new to space and had small ships with primitive weapons. They were about to learn that being young also meant being hungry, being angry, and being willing to fight for what belonged to them. Admiral Kethver had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. He had turned humanity's first contact mission into something much more dangerous. He had created an enemy that would not stop until justice was served, no matter how long it took or how much it cost. The war between old and young had begun, and the galaxy was about to discover which side had the stronger will to fight. The journey back to Earth took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of limping through space in a damaged ship, breathing recycled air that still smelled of smoke and death. 6 weeks of memorial services for 12 crew members who would never see home again. 6 weeks for Captain Sarah Chun to think about what Admiral Kethver had done to her people. The Defiance looked like a wounded animal when it finally reached Earth orbit. Black scorch marks covered the hull where the Zephyrian energy blast had torn through the metal. Emergency patches sealed the hole in Deck 7, but everyone could see the damage. The proud ship that had left Earth as humanity's ambassador to the stars had returned as a victim of alien aggression. Sarah stood in the shuttle bay, watching as the bodies of her crew were transferred to Earth vessels for burial. Each coffin was draped with the flag of the United Earth Space Command. 12 flags, 12 friends. 12 people who had died because an alien admiral thought humans were too young to deserve respect. Commander Marcus Webb's coffin was the last to leave the ship. Sarah placed her hand on the metal surface and made a silent promise. Marcus had believed in humanity's future among the stars. He had died trying to protect humanity's greatest discovery. His death would not be meaningless. The data cores from the Defiance were rushed to Earth's best scientists and engineers. Every scan of the Forerunner ship, every recording of the Zephyrian attack, every detail of Confederacy technology that the crew had observed during their mission. Within hours, the information was being studied by thousands of the brightest minds on Earth, but it was the video recordings that changed everything. Sarah had ordered every moment of the confrontation to be recorded. The footage showed Admiral Kethver's arrogant dismissal of human rights. It showed the warning shots that came closer and closer to the Defiance. It showed the moment when the Zephyrian admiral decided that human lives meant nothing compared to his desire for ancient artifacts. The recording spread across Earth's communication networks like wildfire. Every human alive watched the moment when their species' first diplomatic mission turned into a massacre. They saw their people murdered by aliens who treated them like children playing with toys that belonged to adults. The reaction was swift and terrible. Earth's government had been hoping for peaceful integration into galactic society. They had planned to spend decades learning from older civilizations, slowly building relationships and earning respect through patient diplomacy. Those plans died with the crew of Deck 7. President Martinez addressed the planet from the steps of the United Nations building in New York. Her words were carried to every human settlement on Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies. Citizens of Earth, she began, her voice calm but filled with steel. Today we learned that the galaxy is not the peaceful community we hope to join. Today we learned that some civilizations believe age gives them the right to murder and steal. Today we learned that our children will never be safe among the stars unless we have the strength to protect them. The president's next words would be remembered for generations. Effective immediately, Earth is withdrawing from all Confederacy agreements. We will not bow to those who shed our blood. We will not accept their judgment that we are too young to deserve justice. Starting today, humanity stands alone among the stars, and we will show the galaxy what that means. What followed was the greatest mobilization in human history. Every shipyard on Earth and Mars was converted to military production. Asteroid mining stations began extracting metals for warship hulls. Research facilities that had been studying peaceful applications of alien technology were redirected to developing weapon systems. Universities canceled regular classes and focused their efforts on military engineering, but humanity did not simply try to copy Confederacy technology. Human engineers studied the recorded scans of Zephyrian ships and asked a different question. Instead of wondering how to build the same weapons, they asked how to defeat them. Dr. Elizabeth Harrison led a team of scientists in analyzing every detail of the Zephyrian energy weapons. They discovered that the alien blasters used exotic matter contained in magnetic bottles to create their destructive beams. The technology was elegant and efficient, but it had weaknesses that the ancient races had never bothered to address. They have been using the same basic design for thousands of years, Dr. Harrison explained to the Military Planning Committee. They perfected it and then stopped innovating. We can build countermeasures. Human weapons designers took a completely different approach. Instead of exotic matter and energy beams, they focused on kinetic weapons. Railguns that could accelerate chunks of metal to incredible speeds. Missile systems that could turn asteroids into planet-killing projectiles. Nuclear warheads designed to detonate inside enemy ships. After penetrating their energy shields, the Confederacy had grown comfortable with their advanced technology. They built ships with powerful shields that could stop energy weapons and exotic matter, but they had not prepared for enemies who would throw rocks at them at near light speed. Chief Engineer Torres, promoted to head of Earth's new weapons development program, worked 80-hour days designing humanity's first true warships. His team studied every weakness in Confederacy technology and built systems specifically designed to exploit them. Zephyrian ships rely on harmonic frequencies to maintain their energy shields, he explained to Admiral Elena Vasquez, Sarah's former instructor who had been given command of Earth's new military forces. If we can disrupt those frequencies, their shields will collapse. I can build generators that will turn their own technology against them. Admiral Vasquez was a woman who had spent her career preparing for threats that Earth's leaders hoped would never come. She was 60 years old, with gray hair and scars from combat training exercises. More importantly, she understood that this war would not be won by following the rules that other civilizations expected. The Confederacy fights according to ancient codes of honor, she told her staff officers. They announce their attacks, fight in formation, and give their enemies time to surrender. We are not going to do any of that. We are going to fight like humans. What that meant became clear as Earth's new fleet began to take shape. The ships were smaller than Confederacy vessels but faster and more maneuverable. They were designed to work in groups, supporting each other and striking from unexpected directions. Most importantly, they were built to be expendable. Human commanders were trained to sacrifice their ships if it meant destroying larger enemy vessels. The psychological warfare began even before the first shot was fired. Earth's intelligence services, led by former corporate hackers and military cryptographers, began infiltrating Confederacy communication networks. They did not try to steal military secrets. Instead, they spread the recordings of Admiral Kethver's attack throughout the galaxy. Every species in the Confederacy saw the footage of the Defiance being destroyed. They watched human crew members die for the crime of making a scientific discovery. They heard Kethver's arrogant dismissal of human rights and his claim that age gave him the authority to commit murder. The reaction was not what the Zephyrians expected. Many younger species began to question whether the Confederacy really represented justice and peace. Some of the older races started to worry about what kind of enemy they had created by attacking the humans. But Kethver and his supporters dismissed these concerns. Humans were a young species with primitive technology. They had small ships and simple weapons. Even if they were angry, what could they possibly do against the combined might of the Confederacy? The answer came 6 months after the Defiance returned to Earth. The first Zephyrian outpost to disappear was a small research station studying stellar phenomena in an uninhabited system. The facility simply went silent one day, with no distress signal and no explanation. When a Confederacy patrol arrived to investigate, they found nothing but floating debris and radiation signatures that made no sense. The second attack was more dramatic. A Zephyrian supply depot was destroyed by what appeared to be a meteor shower. Hundreds of small objects struck the facility at incredible speeds, turning buildings and spacecraft into twisted metal. The kinetic energy released was equivalent to several nuclear weapons, but there was no radiation or exotic matter residue that would indicate advanced weapons had been used. It took the Confederacy 3 more attacks to realize they were at war. The human ships appeared out of nowhere, struck with devastating force, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. They did not announce themselves or demand surrender. They simply destroyed their targets and disappeared into the void. The attacks followed no pattern that Confederacy strategists could predict, and the weapons used were unlike anything in their databases. Admiral Kethver was recalled to Unity Prime to explain how a primitive species with a handful of small ships could be causing so much damage to Confederacy infrastructure. He stood before the Council of Ancients in the great chamber carved from star metal, trying to maintain his dignity while admitting that he had seriously underestimated the humans. "They do not fight like civilized beings," he reported to the assembled leaders. "They strike without warning, use crude weapons that somehow penetrate our defenses, and retreat before we can respond. Their tactics violate every principle of honorable warfare." The Vorth representative, a massive crystal being that pulsed with inner light, spoke in its grinding voice. "Perhaps you should not have attacked their ship without proper provocation." Kethver's silver skin darkened with anger. "They refused a lawful order from a senior civilization. I was within my rights to use force. You killed 12 beings who were conducting peaceful exploration," the Nethic delegate whispered like wind through empty spaces. "Now their species seeks vengeance. What did you expect?" The debate continued for days, but no solution emerged. The Confederacy had never faced an enemy like humanity before. Previous conflicts had been fought between civilizations that followed the same basic rules: formal declarations of war, scheduled battles, negotiated surrenders. The humans ignored all of these traditions and fought like wild animals defending their territory. Meanwhile, Earth's war machine continued to grow. New ships rolled out of the orbital shipyards every week. Soldiers trained in combat techniques that emphasized speed, aggression, and surprise attacks. Scientists developed weapons that turned the galaxy's own physics against the Confederacy's advanced technology. Captain Sarah Chun was given command of the rebuilt UAS Defiance II, a ship designed specifically for hunting Zephyrian vessels. The new Defiance was faster than her predecessor and armed with weapons that could punch through energy shields like they were made of glass. But more importantly, she carried a crew that had volunteered for a mission that everyone understood might be suicide. "We are not fighting to conquer the galaxy," Sarah told her officers during their first mission briefing. "We are fighting to teach the galaxy that humanity will not be pushed around. Every Zephyrian ship we destroy sends a message. Every outpost we eliminate proves that age does not automatically mean wisdom." The hunt for Admiral Kethver had begun. Unknown to the Confederacy, human intelligence had been tracking the Admiral's movements since the day the Defiance returned to Earth. They knew which ships he commanded, which routes he traveled, and which systems he considered safe. Earth's hackers had infiltrated Zephyrian communication networks so thoroughly that they often knew Kethver's orders before his own crew did. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. False intelligence was fed to Confederacy networks suggesting that humans were planning to attack a major military base in the Rigel system. Kethver took command of a task force to defend the installation, believing he would finally have a chance to crush the human rebellion. Instead, he would discover that the young species he had dismissed as primitive had learned to hunt their enemies with the patience and cunning of apex predators. The galaxy was about to witness what happened when humanity stopped trying to be diplomatic and started fighting to win. The war between old and young was entering its deadliest phase, and Admiral Kethver was about to learn that some lines should never be crossed. Admiral Kethver stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Glory, watching the empty space around the Rigel defense station. His task force consisted of 15 of the most powerful warships in the Zephyrian fleet, enough firepower to destroy entire planets. According to intelligence reports, the humans were planning their largest attack yet on this facility, but the attack never came. For 3 days, Kethver's ships waited in formation around the military base. Sensors swept the surrounding space constantly, looking for any sign of human vessels. Long-range patrols searched nearby systems for enemy forces. The Admiral grew more frustrated with each passing hour. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "Command is asking for a status update. They want to know when you will engage the human forces." Kethver's silver skin darkened with anger. "Tell them the humans are cowards. They probably detected our presence and fled back to whatever hole they crawled out of." What the Admiral did not know was that Captain Sarah Chun and her strike force were already hunting him. The Rigel system attack had been a deception, designed to draw Kethver away from his normal patrol routes and into a position where the humans could isolate him from reinforcements, while the Zephyrian Admiral waited for an attack that would never come. Human ships were systematically destroying his support network. Supply convoys disappeared without sending distress signals. Communication relays went offline one by one. Patrol vessels that ventured too far from the main fleet simply vanished into the darkness of space. The humans had learned patience from their prey. They watched and waited, gathering intelligence about Zephyrian fleet movements and identifying weaknesses in their formations. Earth's hackers had penetrated so deeply into Confederacy networks that they could track individual ships across the galaxy in real time. "Target acquired," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres from his position at the tactical station aboard the Defiance II. Zephyrian heavy cruiser moving alone through the Vega corridor, designation ZFS Starbound. Crew complement approximately 800. Sarah studied the tactical display. The Starbound was one of Kethver's escort vessels, separated from the main fleet by several light-years. It was following a predictable route back to the Rigel system, unaware that human ships were already in position along its path. "Any other Confederacy vessels in the area?" Sarah asked. "Negative, Captain. The next nearest ship is 6 hours away." At maximum speed, Sarah nodded. This was exactly the kind of engagement that human tactics were designed for. One enemy ship, isolated from support, following a route that the humans had predicted hours in advance. The Starbound's crew probably did not even know they were at war. "All ships, this is Defiance Actual. Execute Hunter Protocol. Target is ZFS Starbound. Weapons free on my command." The human task force consisted of 5 ships, each one smaller than the Zephyrian cruiser but faster and more maneuverable. They approached from different directions, using the gravitational shadows of asteroids and gas clouds to mask their approach. The Starbound sensors would not detect them until it was too late to escape. The attack began with cyber warfare. Human hackers had spent months studying Zephyrian computer systems, learning their weaknesses and developing viruses specifically designed to target their networks. As the Starbound moved through space, its computers began to malfunction. Navigation systems started providing false readings. Weapons targeting became erratic. Communication equipment began broadcasting random signals that would confuse any rescue attempts. Most importantly, the ship's automated distress beacon was disabled before it could send word of the attack. "Sir," the Starbound's communications officer reported to his captain, "we are experiencing system failures across multiple departments. Engineering says it looks like some kind of computer virus." Captain Zethmos, a veteran Zephyrian officer with over 2 centuries of experience, frowned at his displays. "Run full diagnostic protocols and increase sensor sweeps to maximum range. I do not like coincidences." But the diagnostics revealed nothing, because human computer viruses were designed to hide from Zephyrian security systems. The hackers who created them had studied captured Confederacy technology for months, learning how their networks operated and how to move through them. Undetected. The first kinetic strike hit the Starbound's engine section without warning. A chunk of dense metal, accelerated to incredible speed by human railguns, punched through the ship's energy shields like they were not even there. The projectile tore through 3 decks before exploding inside the main reactor housing. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the Zephyrian ship as power fluctuated and artificial gravity failed in several sections. The crew, trained for combat against energy weapons and exotic matter attacks, had no experience dealing with simple kinetic impacts that could penetrate their most advanced defenses. "Damage report," Captain Zethmos shouted over the noise. "Engine room is venting atmosphere," his damage control officer replied. "Main reactor is operating at 30% capacity. We have lost artificial gravity on decks 7 through 12. Where did that attack come from?" "I want firing solutions on the enemy vessels immediately." But the human ships were already moving to new positions, using the debris from their first attack to mask their locations. Zephyrian sensors, designed to detect the energy signatures of Confederacy vessels, could not track ships that operated on completely different principles. The second attack came from a different direction. This time it was a spread of smaller projectiles that struck the Starbound's shield generators. The impacts were precisely calculated to disrupt the harmonic frequencies that maintained the ship's defensive systems. Within seconds, the massive cruiser was flying through space with no protection except its hull armor. "Shields are down," reported the tactical officer. "I cannot get them back online. The frequency generators have been destroyed." Captain Zethmos realized that his ship was being systematically dismantled by an enemy he could not see or fight back against. "All hands, prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace. We need to reach the fleet and warn them about human capabilities." But human engineers had anticipated this tactic. The computer virus that had infected the Starbound systems included a subroutine specifically designed to prevent hyperspace jumps. When the navigation officer tried to activate the faster-than-light drive, nothing happened. "Sir, hyperspace systems are not responding." The computer is showing green lights across all systems, but the drive will not engage. The third attack targeted the ship's communication array. Human missiles, simple chemical rockets that barely registered on Zephyrian sensors, struck the transmission equipment and destroyed it completely. The starbound was now deaf, blind, and unable to call for help. Captain Sarah Chun watched the tactical display as her ships moved into final attack positions. The Zephyrian cruiser was helpless, drifting through space with damaged engines and no shields. Its crew was probably wondering what kind of enemy could destroy such a powerful vessel without ever showing themselves. "All ships, target the bridge section," Sarah commanded. "End this quickly." The final barrage came from all 5 human vessels simultaneously. Kinetic projectiles struck the starbound's command center from multiple directions, turning the bridge into twisted metal and venting atmosphere. The massive Zephyrian warship, which had terrorized human space for months, died without firing a single shot in its own defense. "Target destroyed," Torres reported. "No survivors detected." Sarah felt no satisfaction from the victory. 800 Zephyrian crew members had just died, but their deaths would not bring back Marcus Webb or the other humans killed in the attack on the original Defiance. This was not about revenge anymore. It was about teaching the galaxy that humanity would not be pushed around. "Set course for Rendezvous Point Alpha," she ordered, "and transmit engagement data to Earth Command. They need to know these tactics are working." The destruction of the starbound followed the same pattern as dozens of other attacks over the previous months. Human ships would appear without warning, destroy their targets with weapons that Confederacy technology could not defend against, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. The attacks followed no predictable pattern and seemed to target vessels almost at random. But there was a pattern, one that only became clear when analyzed by Earth's military intelligence computers. Every ship that disappeared was somehow connected to Admiral Kethver's command structure. Supply vessels that supported his fleet, communication relays that carried his orders, patrol ships that provided security for his operations. The humans were not attacking randomly. They were systematically destroying Kethver's ability to command and control his forces. They were isolating him from the rest of the Confederacy fleet, cutting his supply lines and eliminating his support network. Admiral Kethver began to realize what was happening when his weekly status reports to command started going unanswered. Communication relays that should have carried his messages had been destroyed. Supply convoys that should have arrived with fresh provisions and ammunition never appeared. Patrol vessels that should have reported their positions simply vanished. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported during a briefing aboard the Eternal Glory, "we have lost contact with 17 ships over the past month. All were vessels assigned to support our operations." Kethver studied the tactical displays showing the locations where his ships had disappeared. The attacks seemed random, but he was beginning to see a pattern that chilled his silver blood. "They are hunting us," he said quietly. "The humans are not fighting a war. They are conducting an extermination campaign." The realization that he had become the prey instead of the hunter was deeply disturbing to a being who had spent centuries believing in Zephyrian superiority. The humans were using tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare, striking from ambush and showing no mercy to defeated enemies. But Admiral Kethver was about to learn that the systematic destruction of his support network was only the beginning of humanity's campaign. Captain Chun and her strike force had been tracking his movements for weeks, studying his patrol routes and identifying the perfect location for a final confrontation. The Kepler Nebula, where this war had begun with the murder of 12 human crew members, would be where it ended. Sarah Chun had chosen the location deliberately. Kethver would die in the same place where he had killed her friends, where he had stolen humanity's greatest discovery and left them to die in the radiation storms. The trap was already set. Human ships were moving into position around the nebula, their crews preparing for the most important battle in their species' history. Advanced reconnaissance drones were monitoring every approach route ready to detect. The moment when Kethver's fleet entered the kill zone, Earth's hackers had prepared their final virus, a program designed to cripple every Zephyrian ship simultaneously. Human engineers had positioned kinetic weapon platforms throughout the nebula, turning the entire region into a killing field. Most importantly, Captain Chun had prepared a message for Admiral Kethver, words that would explain exactly why he was about to die. The hunt was almost over. Soon, the galaxy would learn what happened to those who shed human blood and thought they could escape the consequences. The ancient races would discover that age meant nothing when facing an enemy that fought not for conquest or glory, but for justice. Admiral Kethver was about to receive an education in human warfare that would be his last. Admiral Kethver's remaining fleet consisted of only 3 ships now. The mighty task force that had once terrorized human space was reduced to his flagship, the Eternal Glory, and 2 escort vessels. Weeks of hit-and-run attacks had destroyed the rest of his command, leaving him isolated and desperate. The admiral stood on his bridge, staring at the swirling gases of the Kepler Nebula on the main view screen. Intelligence reports suggested that the humans had established a base somewhere inside the radiation storms. It was the perfect hiding place for a species that seemed to prefer ambush tactics over honorable combat. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving a transmission from inside the nebula. It is coming from the human ship Defiance." Kethver felt his silver skin grow cold. The Defiance was the ship he had attacked months ago, the vessel whose crew he had killed when they refused to surrender their archaeological discovery. He had thought that ship was destroyed. "Put it on screen," he ordered. Captain Sarah Chun appeared on the view screen, and Kethver was surprised by what he saw. The human female looked older than he remembered, with lines of stress around her eyes and gray streaks in her dark hair. But there was something else in her expression that made the Zephyrian admiral uncomfortable. She looked like a predator that had finally cornered its prey. "Admiral Kethver," Sarah said in a calm, steady voice, "I am Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth ship Defiance II. You murdered my crew. You stole our discovery. You left us to die in this nebula. Now you are going to pay for those crimes." Kethver straightened his uniform and tried to project the authority of his rank. "Captain Chun, you are in violation of Confederacy law by attacking military vessels. Surrender immediately, and you will be treated according to the rules of civilized warfare." Sarah's expression did not change. "You forfeited any claim to civilized treatment when you opened fire on a peaceful exploration vessel. You want to see how a young species fights? You are about to learn." The transmission ended. A moment later, Kethver's sensors detected multiple ships emerging from the nebula's radiation storms. Human vessels appeared on all sides of his small fleet, moving with the coordinated precision of pack hunters closing in for the kill. "Battle stations," Kethver ordered. "All ships, prepare for combat. Target the largest human vessel and fire at will." The Eternal Glory's weapon systems powered up, exotic matter cannons charging with deadly energy. The ship's targeting computers locked onto the Defiance II and prepared to fire. But when the weapons officer pressed the firing stud, nothing happened. "Sir, weapons are not responding," he reported in confusion. "All systems show ready, but the cannons will not fire." At the same moment, similar reports came from the 2 escort vessels. Every Zephyrian ship in the small fleet found itself unable to use its weapons, even though all systems appeared to be functioning normally. "Computer virus," Kethver realized with growing horror. "They have infected our systems." Sarah Chun's voice came over the communication system again, but this time it was being broadcast on all frequencies so that every Confederacy ship in the area could hear her words. "People of the galaxy," she began, "you are about to witness the execution of Admiral Kethver and his crew. This being murdered 12 peaceful explorers and stole scientific discoveries that belonged to humanity. He attacked without warning and left survivors to die in space. This is what happens to those who shed human blood." The first human attack came not from the ships surrounding Kethver's fleet, but from weapons platforms hidden throughout the nebula, kinetic projectiles launched from dozens of locations, converging on the Zephyrian vessels from every direction. The admiral watched in horror as chunks of metal moving at incredible speeds tore through his ships, hulls like they were made of paper. The escort vessel Bright Star was the first to die. A railgun projectile the size of a telephone pole punched through its reactor housing, causing a cascade failure that tore the ship apart from the inside. The explosion lit up the nebula for several seconds before fading into scattered debris. The second escort, Silver Wind, tried to flee but found its engines would not respond to commands. The human virus had infected every system, turning the ship into a helpless target. Missile strikes from multiple human vessels destroyed its hull in a matter of minutes, venting atmosphere and crew into the deadly radiation of the nebula. Kethver found himself alone, surrounded by 50 human warships, aboard a flagship that could not fight back or run away. His crew looked to him for orders, but there was nothing he could do. The humans had planned this execution with surgical precision. "Admiral," his tactical officer said quietly, "we could try to surrender, request quarter under Confederacy law." Kethver looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were beings who had served the Zephyrian Empire faithfully for decades. They did not deserve to die because of his mistakes. But he also knew that the humans had not come here to take prisoners. Captain Chion's image appeared on his viewscreen again. This time she was not alone. Standing beside her were holographic projections of the 12 crew members who had died aboard the original Defiance. The ghosts of the dead had come to witness their killer's judgment. "You have something that belongs to us," Sarah said. "The data you stole from the Forerunner ship, return it now, and your crew might survive what comes next." Kethver felt a spark of hope. Perhaps there was a way to save his people, even if he could not save himself. "The data is in our main computer, but our systems are locked by your virus. We cannot access it." "We will handle that," Sarah replied. "Prepare to be boarded." Human soldiers in armored spacesuits began cutting through the Eternal Glory's hull with plasma torches. They moved with military precision, securing key areas of the ship and establishing control over critical systems. Within an hour, they had reached the bridge. The soldiers were led by a human female who introduced herself as Major Patricia Santos. She was carrying a portable computer designed to interface with Zephyrian systems. "Admiral Kethver," she said, "you will provide the access codes for your ship's data storage. Refuse, and we will execute your crew one by one until you comply." The Zephyrian admiral looked around his bridge at his officers. These beings had followed him into this trap, trusting in his leadership and the superiority of their technology. Now they would pay the price for his arrogance. "The codes are in my personal files," he said quietly. "I will transfer them to you." Major Santos connected her device to the Zephyrian computer system and began downloading everything. Not just the Forerunner data, but technical specifications for Confederacy ships, military plans, communication protocols, and strategic intelligence. The humans were taking everything they could use against their enemies. When the download was complete, Sarah Chun appeared on the bridge in person. She looked around at the advanced Zephyrian technology, the elegant displays and sophisticated control systems, then her eyes settled on Admiral Kethver. "Your crew will be transferred to escape pods and released," she said. "They will be picked up by Confederacy vessels and returned home. But you, Admiral, will not be leaving this ship." Kethver straightened his uniform one last time. "I am prepared to face the consequences of my actions. But tell me, Captain Chun, what do you hope to accomplish with this war? Do you think killing me will change anything?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, looking at the being who had started this conflict by murdering her friends. When she spoke, her words were broadcast across the galaxy for all to hear. "You called us young," she said. "You were right. We are young enough to believe in things like justice, progress, and earning respect instead of demanding it. This war was never about conquest or revenge. It was about teaching the galaxy that age means nothing without wisdom, and wisdom means nothing without action." She gestured to the tactical displays showing the positions of human ships throughout the nebula. "In the past year, we have destroyed 47 Confederacy vessels using technology that your ancient civilizations considered primitive. We have shown that innovation beats tradition, that hunger beats complacency, and that justice beats bureaucracy. Sarah turned back to Kethver. But the real lesson comes next. Instead of keeping the Forerunner data for ourselves, we are going to give it to every species in the galaxy. Every civilization, including our enemies, will have access to the greatest archaeological discovery in galactic history. The Admiral stared at her in disbelief. You would share such valuable information with those who have fought against you? That is what young species do, Sarah replied. We believe that knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. We believe that progress comes from cooperation, not domination. We believe that the future belongs to those who build it together, not those who try to own it alone. She activated her communication device. Earth Command, this is Captain Chun. Execute Protocol 7. Broadcast the Forerunner data on all frequencies. Every language, every network in the galaxy. Make sure everyone receives it. As the data began transmitting across space, Sarah looked at Admiral Kethver one last time. You wanted to know what we hope to accomplish? We are showing the galaxy what leadership looks like. Real leadership does not come from age or power. It comes from wisdom, courage, and the willingness to do what is right even when it costs you everything. The execution was swift. Kethver died knowing that his actions had created an enemy that would change the galaxy forever. His crew was released as promised, picked up by Confederacy rescue ships, and returned home to tell the story of what they had witnessed. The Forerunner data spread across galactic communication networks like wildfire. Every species, from the most ancient to the newest, received complete access to technology that could revolutionize their understanding of physics, engineering, and interstellar travel. The information that the Confederacy had tried to hoard for the oldest civilizations was now available to everyone. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. 17 species formally requested to leave the Confederacy and join humanity's new alliance. They called it the Progressive Coalition, and its founding principle was simple. Age means nothing without wisdom, and wisdom means nothing without action. The coalition's charter, written by human diplomats and signed by representatives from dozens of worlds, established new rules for galactic civilization. Technology would be shared freely. Scientific discoveries would benefit all species. Conflicts would be resolved through negotiation, not through claims of ancient privilege. Most importantly, membership in the coalition was based on merit and contribution, not on how long a species had existed. Young civilizations with new ideas were welcomed as equals to ancient races with vast experience. Innovation was valued as much as tradition. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler Nebula, Captain Sarah Chun stood before the first meeting of the Coalition Council. The chamber was filled with beings from across the galaxy, all united in their belief that the future belonged to those brave enough to build it together. The old galaxy was ruled by fear, she told the assembled delegates. Fear of change, fear of new ideas, fear of losing power to younger species. We offer something different. We offer hope. The Progressive Coalition grew rapidly as more species abandoned the stagnant Confederacy for a future built on cooperation and innovation. Within a year, the new alliance included over 100 worlds and was expanding faster than anyone had thought possible. The galaxy learned that sometimes being young is not a weakness, but the most dangerous advantage of all. Young species are hungry, innovative, and unafraid of change. They fight for what they believe in and refuse to accept that age automatically grants authority. Admiral Kethver had intended to put humanity in its place as a minor species that needed guidance from its elders. Instead, he had created a new order where wisdom mattered more than age, where justice mattered more than tradition, and where the future belonged to those brave enough to reach for it. The stars themselves seemed brighter in the new galaxy that humanity had helped to create.
The human starship Tenacity drifted silently through the void, its bulky frame a sharp contrast to the sleek vessels that normally traveled these parts of space. Captain Jack Moore stood on the bridge, his weathered face reflecting in the reinforced glass as he stared out at the stars. "Captain, we're picking up an unknown signal," said Officer Dan, his fingers moving quickly across the control panel. "It's not matching any human patterns." Jack straightened his uniform. After 15 years in space, this was what they had been waiting for. "First contact," he whispered. The Tenacity wasn't the most advanced ship in the human fleet, but it was reliable. While newer ships focused on streamlined designs and automated systems, the Tenacity was built differently. It had backup systems for its backup systems. It had manual controls that could work without power. It had parts that could be fixed with simple tools. Some called it outdated. Jack called it prepared. "Put it on screen," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a ship unlike anything they had seen before. It gleamed like polished metal, with no visible engines or weapons. It moved with a grace that made the Tenacity seem like a rock by comparison. "They're hailing us, sir," Dan reported. Jack nodded. "Accept the call." The face that appeared on screen wasn't what anyone expected. The alien had smooth blue skin with small ridges where eyebrows would be on a human. Its eyes were large and entirely black. "I am Commander Ento of the Vril Confederation," the alien said, its mouth moving strangely around the words. Some kind of translator was working. "You are trespassing in Vril space." Jack stepped forward. "I'm Captain Jack Moore of the Earth, ship Tenacity. We weren't aware this sector belonged to anyone. We come in peace and wish to establish friendly relations." Ento's eyes narrowed. "Your ship, it is very strange. Our scans show multiple redundant systems and... Are those manual controls?" "Yes," Jack answered proudly. "The Tenacity is designed to function under almost any conditions." A sound came from Ento that the translator couldn't quite catch, but it sounded like laughter. "Primitive," Ento said finally. "But we are not hostile to developing species. The Vril Confederation welcomes peaceful contact. We invite you to our nearest outpost for proper diplomatic talks." Jack didn't miss the condescending tone, but first contact was too important to risk over pride. "We accept your invitation." 3 days later, Jack and his small team sat in a large, perfectly circular room aboard the Vril station. The walls pulsed with soft light, and the temperature adjusted constantly to match human comfort levels. Commander Ento sat across from them with 3 other Vril officials. They had been discussing trade and knowledge exchange, but the conversation kept turning to human technology, specifically their ships. "Your vessels are fascinating in their simplicity," said one Vril official named Tool. "You build as if expecting systems to fail." "Because systems do fail," replied Jack. "Space is dangerous and unpredictable. Only if your technology is flawed," said Ento. "Vril ships haven't experienced a critical failure in over 300 years. Jack's second-in-command, Lisa Green, leaned forward. "And if you encountered something new? Something you hadn't prepared for?" Ento's face remained expressionless. "The Vril prepare for all possibilities through superior design and perfect execution. Your human approach of, what do you call it, redundancy? It's wasteful. And these backup systems you speak of, mechanical controls that don't require power, paper maps of space? These are the marks of a species that doesn't trust its own creations, or a species that respects the unknown," Jack countered. The meeting continued for hours, with the Vril explaining their advanced propulsion systems, their perfect communication network, their flawless defense systems. With each explanation, their tone grew more dismissive of human achievements. As they walked back to their shuttle, Lisa whispered to Jack, "They think we're children playing with toys." Jack nodded grimly. "And that worries me." Over the next few weeks, the Tenacity crew learned more about the Vril. They were an ancient species that had mastered space travel thousands of years before humans left Earth. They had encountered many other species, most less advanced than themselves. The Vril spoke of these encounters as guiding these species, but something in their tone made Jack uncomfortable. His worries grew when Officer Dan discovered hidden files in the data the Vril had shared. Files that showed what happened to species that resisted Vril guidance. They've been systematically taking over, Jack said as they reviewed the evidence in the secure meeting room. Not through war, at least not usually. They establish contact, share some technology, make the other species dependent on them, and then gradually take control. And if a species resists? Asked Lisa. Jack pointed to the screen showing the remains of a planet called Doral. They make examples. We need to warn Earth, said Dan. Already done, Jack replied. But the message will take weeks to reach home. Until then, we play along. The next day, Commander Ento invited Jack to observe Vril military exercises. A display of friendship, he called it. Jack watched as 50 Vril ships moved in perfect formation, executing maneuvers with precision that human fleets could only dream of. Their tactics were flawless, their coordination perfect. Impressive, Jack admitted. This is merely a basic exercise, said Ento. The Vril understand true strategy, not the chaos that humans call warfare. What do you mean? Asked Jack, keeping his tone curious rather than defensive. We've studied your military history, Ento explained. Your generals praise adaptability and unpredictability. You value the ability to, how do you say it, think on your feet? True strategy requires perfect planning and execution, not desperate improvisation. As Jack watched the Vril ships move like a single organism, he thought about Earth's history, about battles won by breaking formation, about victories claimed through surprise and adaptation, about the countless times that humanity's desperate improvisation had saved them from extinction. Perhaps, Jack said carefully, different species develop different approaches based on their experiences. Ento made that untranslatable sound again, definitely laughter. A diplomatic answer, Captain Moore, but history favors perfection, not improvisation. Remember that when your people consider their response to our offer of guidance. As Jack returned to the tenacity that evening, he knew that war was coming. The Vril would never accept humanity as equals, and humans would never accept being controlled. Set course away from the Vril outpost, he ordered as he reached the bridge. We need to prepare. Behind them, the perfect formations of Vril ships continued their flawless exercises, unaware that they would soon face an enemy who thrived on the very chaos they despised. 2 months after first contact, the Tenacity orbited Earth's largest colony on the planet horizon. Captain Jack Moore stared at the message on his screen with a deep frown. They can't be serious, he muttered. What is it, sir? Asked Lisa, who stood nearby reviewing security protocols. Jack turned the screen so she could see. The Vril are demanding that all human colonies accept their protection. They want permanent Vril bases on every human world and veto power over our expansion efforts. That's not protection, Lisa said. That's control. Jack nodded grimly. Earth Command agrees. They've rejected the demands. The door to the bridge slid open as Lieutenant Tom Wilson entered. Tom was the Tenacity's tactical officer, a position he'd earned through unconventional thinking rather than top academy scores. Captain, you wanted to see me? Tom asked. Yes. Jack gestured to the screen. We're being assigned to protect the outer colonies. Earth expects the Vril to make a show of force. Tom studied the message, his eyes narrowing. They'll target smaller outposts first, make an example without risking a full-scale war. That's what Command thinks too. We're heading to New Haven. It's our most distant colony and the most vulnerable. 3 days later, the Tenacity arrived at New Haven, a small mining colony with only basic defenses. They weren't alone for long. Within hours, 3 Vril ships appeared at the edge of the system. They're hailing us, Officer Dan reported. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a stern-faced Vril with decorated armor. I am Admiral Nax of the Vril Enforcement Fleet. You will remove your vessel from this system immediately. This colony now falls under Vril protection. Jack stood tall. This is a human colony on a planet we discovered and settled. We reject your claim. Nax's black eyes seemed to glitter. Your rejection is noted, Captain, but meaningless. One human ship cannot stand against even a small Vril force. Your strategy of placing outdated vessels as defenders is puzzling, Perhaps there's more to our strategy than you understand, Jack replied calmly. There is no depth to primitive thinking, Nax said dismissively. You have 6 hours to depart. As the screen went dark, Lisa turned to Jack. 6 ships against 3 isn't bad odds. 6? Jack raised an eyebrow. Tom smiled slightly. The tenacity counts as 4 in my book. Those Vril ships are perfectly designed, but they've never faced anything like us. Jack nodded. Let's make sure we're ready. Tom, I want unusual tactics. The kind that would make an academy instructor fail you. Those are my specialties, sir. 6 hours later, the Vril ships approached in perfect formation. Their sleek hulls gleamed in the light of New Haven's sun as they moved with synchronized precision. They're charging weapons, Dan reported. Launch our decoys, ordered Jack. The tenacity released 6 small objects that appeared on scanners as full-sized ships. A simple trick, but one that might work. The Vril are adjusting formation, Tom reported. They're spreading out to engage. All targets. Jack leaned forward. Now take us in, full thrust, then cut engines on my mark. The tenacity surged forward, accelerating directly toward the lead Vril ship. At the last moment, Jack shouted, "Mark!" The engines went silent and the ship's momentum carried it forward while its heat signature vanished from sensors. An old smuggler's trick that Tom had suggested. They've lost us, Lisa said with surprise. The Vril ships fired on the decoys, their perfect formation becoming a liability as they focused on targets that weren't there. Bring us alongside the lead ship, Jack ordered. Weapons ready. The tenacity drifted silently into position. On the view screen they could see the Vril vessel up close, beautiful, elegant, and completely unaware of their presence. Fire, Jack commanded. The tenacity's weapons might not have been the most advanced, but at this range they didn't need to be. The Vril ship's perfect hull cracked under the barrage, its systems failing. The other Vril ships are turning to engage, Dan warned. Evasive pattern Delta, Jack ordered. Tom had designed Delta pattern specifically for this encounter. Instead of the smooth, predictable evasions that most ships used, it involved random thruster bursts, sudden stops, and changes in direction that defied tactical sense. On screen, they watched as the Vril weapons fired with precision, at where the tenacity should have been based on normal flight patterns, but the human ship was never where it was expected to be. Their targeting systems can't adapt, Tom said with a grin. They're designed for perfection against predictable opponents. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, 1 Vril ship was disabled, another severely damaged, and the third retreating at high speed. The bridge crew cheered, but Jack raised his hand for silence. This was just a test. They wanted to see how we would fight. And what did they learn? Asked Lisa. That we don't fight the way they expect, Jack replied. That might confuse them for now, but they'll adapt. On the damaged Vril ship, Admiral Nax stared at the battle recordings with growing frustration. The human vessel had moved in patterns that defied logic. It had shut down systems in the middle of combat, a suicidal tactic by Vril standards. It had fired from positions no proper warship would take. Inefficient, he muttered. Wasteful, illogical. Yet the humans had won. Admiral, his second-in-command, approached cautiously. The High Command requests your report. Nax's eyes narrowed. Tell them the humans are more unpredictable than anticipated, but it changes nothing. Their victory was luck, not strategy. And if they continue to be lucky, then we will bring more ships, Nax said firmly. Luck fails against overwhelming force. Perfect execution cannot be defeated by chaos. Back on the tenacity, Jack received a transmission from Earth Command. The Vril had declared that all human colonies must surrender within 30 days, or face consequences. They were positioning fleets near every human outpost. It's going to be a long war, Jack told his crew. But today we learned something important. The Vril might be advanced, but they don't understand us. They see our backups and redundancies as weaknesses. They see our adaptability as disorder. Tom nodded. They fight like they've never lost. We fight like we're used to it. And that, said Jack, might just save us all. As the tenacity set course deeper into the colony system, Its engines hummed with a rhythm that was distinctly imperfect, but reliable. Just like the humans who built it. The red alert klaxon woke Captain Jack Moore from a restless sleep. He was on his feet and pulling on his uniform before his mind fully registered what was happening. "Captain, to the bridge," came Lisa's voice over the intercom. Multiple Vril ships approaching New Haven Colony. Jack rushed through the corridors of the Tenacity, passing crew members hurrying to battle stations. When he reached the bridge, the main screen showed a formation of 7 Vril vessels approaching the colony. "Status report," Jack demanded as he took his command chair. 7 Vril warships entered the system 10 minutes ago, Lisa replied. "They're heading straight for the colony. No response to our hails." Tom looked up from the tactical station. "Their formation is different this time. They've spread out to prevent us from using the same trick." Jack nodded. "They're learning. Should we retreat?" Dan asked quietly. "Those are heavy cruisers. We're outgunned." "If we leave, New Haven falls," Jack said firmly. "We stay. Tom, what options do we have?" Tom's fingers danced across his console. "I've been studying old Earth naval battles. Before ships had computers or even engines. They fought using wind and tide. We don't have wind in space," Lisa pointed out. Tom smiled. "No, but we have gravity wells, solar radiation, and debris fields. The Vril move like every part of space is the same. They don't use the environment." "Show me," Jack ordered. Tom displayed a map of the system. "Here's my plan." 30 minutes later, the Tenacity positioned itself between the oncoming Vril fleet and the colony. A single ship facing 7. "They're hailing us," Dan announced. Admiral Nax's face appeared on screen. "Captain Moore, your persistence is noted, but futile. Surrender your colony and withdraw." "I have a counteroffer," Jack replied calmly. "Leave human space and we won't destroy your fleet." Nax's expression didn't change, but his voice hardened. "Your overconfidence will be your undoing." The screen went dark. "They're powering weapons," Dan reported. "Execute Phase 1, Jack ordered. The Tenacity fired its engines at full power, racing toward the approaching fleet. On the Vril command ship, Admiral Nax watched with confusion. "The human vessel is on a direct collision course," his second-in-command reported. "They wouldn't sacrifice their only ship," Nax reasoned. "It must be a feint. Maintain formation and prepare to fire." The Tenacity continued its charge, accelerating to dangerous speeds. "Now," Jack commanded when they were just moments from impact. The human ship abruptly cut its main engines and fired maneuvering thrusters, sending it into a spinning dive that barely missed the lead Vril ship while releasing a cloud of metallic particles in its wake. "What was that?" demanded Nax as the particles obscured their sensors. The answer came seconds later as the Tenacity, now behind the Vril formation, fired its weapons directly at the debris cloud. The metallic particles amplified the energy, creating a blinding flash that temporarily disabled the Vril ship's sensitive targeting systems. "Phase 2, Jack ordered. The Tenacity raced toward the nearby asteroid field, drawing 3 Vril ships, in pursuit while the others remained temporarily blinded. "They're following," Lisa confirmed. Just as Tom predicted, the human ship weaved through the asteroid field, taking paths too narrow for the larger Vril vessels. One Vril ship clipped an asteroid, sending it spinning into the path of another. Both vessels took damage but continued the pursuit. Meanwhile, engineer Kate Reed worked frantically in the engine room. The Tenacity had taken hits during their initial pass and systems were failing. "Coolant leak in Section 4, shouted her assistant. Kate grabbed a metal canister. "Old school fix," she muttered, spraying a substance that immediately hardened over the leak. It wasn't in any repair manual, but it would hold. On the bridge, Jack watched as the remaining 4 Vril ships regained their systems and moved to cut off the Tenacity's escape from the asteroid field. "We're surrounded," Dan said, his voice tight. "Good," Jack replied. "Execute Phase 3. The Tenacity suddenly shut down all systems except life support, appearing dead in space. The 7 Vril ships approached cautiously, their perfect formation now ragged after navigating the asteroid field. "The human vessel appears disabled," Nax's officer reported. Shall we finish them? Nax studied the sensor readings. Something isn't right. Their power readings are too low. Scan for... His order came too late. Hidden among the asteroids were the mining charges that the Tenacity had placed earlier, simple explosives normally used by the colonists to break up asteroids for mining. Detonate, Jack ordered. The charges exploded, sending thousands of asteroid fragments in all directions. The Vril ships, clustered together around what they thought was a disabled prey, suddenly found themselves in a hailstorm of rocky debris. Evasive maneuvers, Nax shouted. But the Vril ships weren't designed for quick, unpredictable movements. Two smaller vessels took critical hits, their perfect hulls punctured in multiple places, the others scattered, their formation breaking. Completely. Now, Kate, Jack called over the intercom. In the engine room, Kate bypassed safety protocols and rerouted emergency power. The Tenacity roared back to life, its weapons targeting the disorganized Vril ships one by one. The battle raged for another hour. The Tenacity took heavy damage. Its hull breached in 3 sections, weapon systems failing, engines operating at minimal capacity. But the Vril fleet fared worse. 3 ships destroyed, 2 crippled, and the remaining 2, including Nax's command vessel, retreating from the system. They're running, Lisa said in disbelief. Jack slumped in his chair, feeling every one of his years. Status report. Hull breaches on decks 3, 5, and 7, Dan replied. Emergency force fields holding. Weapons at 30%. Engines at 25%. Casualties, 12 injured, no deaths. Jack nodded, relief washing over him. Get me Kate on the comm. Kate's soot-covered face appeared on a small screen. We're holding together, Captain. Barely. I've got teams using manual patches on the worst breaches. Good work. How long until we're operational? Kate wiped sweat from her brow. With proper facilities, 3 weeks with what we have here? I can get us moving in 3 days, but we'll be limping. Do what you can. The Vril will be back with more ships. After the communication ended, Tom approached Jack's chair. Sir, we took some data from the Vril ships during the battle. Their systems are incredibly advanced, but they're centralized. No redundancies. A weakness, Jack noted. Yes. And their formations are perfect, but predictable. They don't adapt well to chaos. Jack stood slowly, wincing at the pain in his shoulder, from where he'd been thrown against a console during the battle. Get that data to Earth Command. We need to share what we've learned with the fleet. 3 days later, as Kate had promised, the Tenacity limped away from New Haven Colony, leaving behind additional weapons and crew to help defend the outpost. They needed repairs that only Earth's shipyards could provide. On his command ship, Admiral Nax reviewed the battle footage for the 100th time. His perfect record was now tarnished. 7 ships against 1, and he had retreated. The human vessel's movements make no logical sense, he told his officers. They exposed vulnerabilities deliberately. They shut down systems mid-battle. They used mining explosives as weapons. Primitive tactics, one officer suggested. No, Nax replied, his voice cold. Not primitive, different, and dangerous. We have underestimated these humans. He stood and walked to the viewport, staring out at the stars. We will gather a larger fleet. We will study their tactics, and next time, we will crush this human ship and its captain. What Nax didn't understand, couldn't understand, was that the Tenacity wasn't special because of its technology or firepower. It was special because of its crew. Humans who expected failure and prepared for it. Humans who improvised when plans collapsed. Humans who turned disadvantages into strengths. The war had truly begun, and neither side would ever be the same. The Tenacity floated in Earth's orbital shipyard, its battle-scarred hull visible even from a distance. After 2 months of repairs, the ship looked less damaged, but far from new. The scorch marks and patched hull sections told a story of survival against impossible odds. Captain Jack Moore stood in the observation deck watching as workers finished the final repairs. Beside him, Admiral Cole from Earth Command studied a display showing the current positions of Vril forces. They've taken 3 more outposts since New Haven, Admiral Cole said grimly. But they've slowed their advance. They're being cautious now, Jack replied. We bloodied their nose. And they don't like that. The Admiral gestured to the display. Intelligence suggests they're gathering a massive fleet for a push into our core systems. We need to strike first. Jack raised an eyebrow. With what? Our ships are outmatched in almost every way. Except one. Admiral Cole smiled. Creativity. We're forming a special task force. 5 ships with captains who think like you do. Unconventional, adaptable, and the tenacity will lead them. 3 days later, the Tenacity led its small fleet out of Earth orbit. The ships were a mixed group, some new, some old, all modified based on what they'd learned about Vril weaknesses. On the bridge, Jack addressed his expanded command team. Lisa remained as his second-in-command. Tom had been promoted to strategy officer, and Engineer Kate had earned a place at the senior staff table after her miracle work at New Haven. The Vril expect us to defend, Jack explained. Instead, we're going to attack. Tom pointed to a star map. We've identified their primary communications relay in this sector. It coordinates all Vril fleet movements. Our first target. Kate spoke up. I've modified our communication systems to broadcast on Vril frequencies. We can send false orders, create confusion. Controlled chaos. Jack nodded approvingly. The thing the Vril understand least. The small human fleet traveled through 3 systems without detection, using a route that Vril ships never took, through the turbulent gases of a nebula that their sensors couldn't navigate effectively. It was risky, but as Jack had told his captains, safe paths lead to predictable outcomes. When they reached the Vril communications relay, they found it heavily guarded by 8 warships. They're scanning us, Dan reported from his station. Begin the deception, Jack ordered. Kate activated her modified transmitter, broadcasting a message that appeared to come from Vril High Command. The message ordered 6 of the 8 ships to investigate a false human incursion in a nearby system. On the lead Vril defender, confusion reigned. The commander checked and rechecked the authorization codes, which Kate had perfectly replicated from data captured during previous encounters. The codes are valid, the Vril commander told his officers, but the timing is unusual. Perhaps it relates to the human fleet movements reported yesterday, suggested his second. The commander hesitated, then made his decision. We will comply. 2 ships will remain to guard the relay. Jack watched as 6 Vril ships departed the area. Phase 2, he ordered. The 5 human ships split into 3 groups approaching from different vectors. When the remaining Vril ships moved to intercept the largest group, the others struck from behind. The battle was brief, but intense. Both Vril ships were destroyed, and 2 human vessels took heavy damage. We have 40 minutes before those other ships realize they've been tricked, Tom calculated. Let's make them count. Kate led a boarding team onto the relay station while the fleet stood guard. Inside, they found technology far beyond human capabilities, but Kate had studied the Vril systems extensively. They think in perfect patterns, she explained to her team. Their code is elegant but predictable. Her fingers flew across the alien console as she uploaded a virus, not a sophisticated one by Vril standards, but one designed to create small, random errors. Not enough to shut systems down, but enough to create doubt in the precision the Vril relied on. Done, she announced after 20 minutes. Let's go. The human fleet departed just as the 6 Vril ships returned. They pursued, but the humans, scattered in different directions, each taking a different escape route, none of them logical by Vril standards. Back on Admiral Nax's flagship, the reports of the raid caused fury. How did they bypass our sensors? He demanded. How did they falsify command codes? His tactical officer had no answers that satisfied. The humans were behaving in ways that defied Vril military doctrine. The damage to the relay? Nax asked. Minimal, Admiral, but the officer hesitated. Speak. There are anomalies in the system. Small errors in transmission. Data packets arriving out of sequence. Nothing critical, but perfect systems don't have errors. Nax finished, his anger growing. The humans are trying to create doubt in our technology. Over the next 2 weeks, the human task force struck 5 more Vril targets, never engaging in direct battles when they could avoid it, always leaving behind confusion and doubt. False communications sent Vril ships on wild pursuits. Supply. Depots found their inventory numbers mysteriously changed. Navigation beacons gave readings that were off by tiny, varying amounts. None of these actions would win the war directly. But together, they began to erode the Vril's greatest strength, their absolute confidence in their technological perfection. On the Tenacity, Jack received a transmission from Earth Command. The Vril had withdrawn from 2 occupied human colonies, apparently to consolidate their forces. "It's working," Lisa said with cautious optimism. "For now," Jack replied. "But they're adaptable too, in their way. And Admiral Nax won't stop until he defeats us or we defeat him." As if summoned by his words, alarms blared across the bridge. "Multiple Vril signatures," Dan called out. 15, no, 20 ships. They were hiding behind the moon's magnetic field. "All hands to battle stations," Jack ordered calmly. "Tom, do we run or fight?" Tom studied his tactical display. "They've cut off our escape routes very thoroughly, almost like they knew where we'd go." "They're learning," Jack said grimly. "Signal the fleet, battle formation Delta." The 5 human ships moved into position, preparing to face a force 4 times their size. Jack knew the odds were terrible, but he had faced terrible odds before. "Sir," Dan called out, "the lead Vril ship is hailing us." Admiral Nax's face appeared on screen, his expression as cold as ever. "Captain Moore, your raids have been instructive, but they end today." "We'll see about that," Jack replied. "No," Nax said with unusual emotion. "You have been a worthy opponent, so I will tell you, you are already defeated. Your communication tricks, we've been tracking them. Your escape routes, we've studied them. Your chaotic tactics, we've analyzed them." Jack felt a chill. The Vril had adapted faster than expected. "This time," Nax continued, "we will not underestimate human unpredictability. We have prepared for every irrational move you might make." As the screen went dark, Jack looked at his crew. "Well," he said with a grim smile, "then we'll just have to be even more irrational than they expect." The Tenacity moved forward to meet the overwhelming Vril fleet, its battle-scarred hull gleaming in the light of an alien sun, ready for its greatest challenge yet. The Tenacity shuddered as another blast struck its port side. Warning lights flashed across the bridge as systems failed one after another. Captain Jack Moore gripped his command chair, watching as 20 Vril warships surrounded his small fleet. "Status. Report," he called out, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Hull breaches on decks 2 and 4, Dan replied. "Shields at 17%, weapons at 30%. 2 of our support ships have been disabled." Jack studied the tactical display. Admiral Nax had indeed learned from their previous encounters. The Vril ships moved in changing patterns, not the rigid formations they once favored. They anticipated the human vessel's evasive maneuvers, cutting off escape routes before they were taken. "They're predicting our unpredictability," Tom said, frustration clear in his voice. "Then we need to be unpredictable in a way they can't predict," Jack replied. He opened a channel to the engine room. "Kate, I need options." Engineer Kate Reed's voice came through, background noise suggesting frantic repair work. "The main drive is holding, but barely. If we push it past 80%, there's a good chance it'll explode." Jack exchanged looks with Lisa. "And if we wanted it to explode?" A pause. "You want to blow up our own ship?" "I want the Vril to think we're blowing up our ship." Kate's laugh came through the comm. "Now that's the kind of crazy I can work with. Give me 10 minutes. Jack turned to Tom. "Signal the remaining ships. Tell them to execute fallback plan Omega on my mark." "Omega, sir? That's a full retreat." "That's what it looks like, yes." Understanding dawned on Tom's face as he sent the message. The two undamaged human ships acknowledged and prepared to break away from the battle. On his flagship, Admiral Nax watched the human fleet with growing satisfaction. His patience had paid off. After the humiliation at the relay station, he had dedicated himself to understanding human tactics. He had run thousands of simulations based on Earth's military history. He had studied the Tenacity's battle records until he could predict Captain Moore's moves before they happened. The smaller human vessels are preparing to flee, his tactical officer reported. Their formation suggests they will scatter in 3 directions. Ignore them, Nax ordered. Focus all fire on the Tenacity. That ship and its captain are the real threat. The Vril fleet intensified its attack on the human flagship, driving it backward. The Tenacity returned fire sporadically, its movements becoming erratic. Sir, Dan called out on the Tenacity's bridge. They're focusing everything on us. The other ships can escape. Good, Jack replied. Phase 2. Tom, set a collision course with Nax's flagship. Collision course, aye, Tom confirmed, programming the suicidal trajectory. Jack opened a ship-wide channel. All hands prepare for emergency evacuation. This is not a drill. Proceed to escape pods on my mark. Lisa looked at him with concern. Jack, what are you planning? The one thing the Vril would never do themselves, he answered. Kate, status? Ready when you are, Captain, came the reply from engineering. But I'm staying aboard to finish this. Negative. That's an order. Kate, everyone gets off this ship. With respect, sir, someone needs to make the final adjustments manually. The automation is too damaged. Jack knew arguing would waste precious time. Understood. But you get to an escape pod the second it's done. The Tenacity accelerated toward the Vril flagship, weapons firing in a pattern that seemed desperate and uncoordinated. To Vril sensors, it appeared that the human ship was making a final futile attack. The human vessel is on a collision course. Nax's second in command, you reported. Their engine signature is becoming unstable. They're attempting self-destruction, Nax realized. A primitive sacrifice. Target their propulsion systems. The Vril ships adjusted their fire, trying to disable the approaching human vessel before it could reach them. But the Tenacity moved with unexpected bursts of speed, dodging just enough of the incoming fire to maintain its approach. Now, Jack ordered. Throughout the ship, crew members rushed to escape pods. On the bridge, Jack was the last to leave his post, ensuring all others had evacuated. In engineering, Kate worked feverishly, rerouting power and bypassing safety systems. As warnings blared around her, she made the final connections, then sprinted for the nearest escape pod. The Tenacity's engines flared with impossible brightness, radiation spilling from apparent breaches in the containment systems. To Vril sensors, it registered as a catastrophic failure. The ship was about to explode. Evasive maneuvers, Nax commanded, too late. The Tenacity slammed into the side of the Vril flagship, but instead of exploding, something else happened. Kate's modifications released a massive electromagnetic pulse, combined with a specialized virus upload, directly into the Vril vessel's systems. The pulse spread from ship to ship through the Vril's interconnected network, something that would never happen in human vessels with their isolated systems. Lights flickered and died across the Vril fleet as their perfect technology failed them. In his escape pod, Jack watched as the Vril ships drifted powerless. His pod's simple mechanical systems, technology the Vril had mocked as primitive, continued to function perfectly. All pods report in, he ordered through the emergency channel. One by one, the crew confirmed their survival, all except one. Engineering pod, report, Jack called, tension in his voice. After a long pause, a weak signal came through. Engineering, reporting. Kate's voice sounded pained but alive. Did it work? See for yourself, Jack replied, relief washing over him. Through her pod's viewport, Kate could see the disabled Vril fleet. The Tenacity was still partially embedded in Nax's flagship, damaged beyond repair but victorious in its final mission. Hours later, human reinforcements arrived to find the Vril fleet still drifting helplessly. Admiral Nax's ship had managed to restore minimal power, enough for life support and communications. Jack's pod was brought aboard the lead human vessel, where he immediately took command of recovery operations. When a signal came from the Vril flagship, he accepted the call. Admiral Nax appeared on screen, his ship's lighting dim behind him. "Captain Moore," he acknowledged. "Admiral," Jack replied evenly. "Your strategy was unexpected, to sacrifice your vessel in such a manner. Not sacrificed, used. Every part of it, right to the end." Nax was silent for a moment. "The Vril Confederation requests terms for cessation of hostilities." Jack allowed himself a small smile. "I'll connect you with Earth Command. They'll discuss the details." After the communication ended, Lisa approached Jack. "We've recovered 97% of the crew. Kate's pod was damaged, but she'll recover." "And the tenacity?" Lisa's expression softened. "Beyond salvage. But they're already talking about building a new one, with some improvements based on what we've learned." Jack nodded, feeling the loss of his ship but pride in what they had accomplished. "The Vril mocked our redundancies, our backups, our primitive approaches. They never understood that we built that way because we expect things to go wrong, and we adapt when they do," Lisa added. 3 months later, Jack stood in Earth's largest shipyard, watching as workers put the finishing touches on a new vessel. Beside him stood Kate, recovered from her injuries and now chief engineer of the new ship. "What do you think?" she asked, gesturing at the vessel. "It's different," Jack admitted. The new ship incorporated some Vril technology, adapted to human design philosophy. It was more advanced than the original Tenacity, but still maintained the redundancies and backup systems that had proven so crucial. "Different, but still ours," Kate agreed. "And look what they're calling it." Jack smiled as he read the name being painted on the hull. Tenacity 2. Admiral Nax stood in the observation chamber of the Vril High Command, watching as engineers studied human technology. The peace treaty had included technology exchanges, monitored carefully by both sides. "Their designs are inefficient," one engineer commented. "Multiple systems performing the same function, manual backups that require physical operation." "Yes," Nax agreed. "And that is precisely why they defeated us." He turned to face the gathered Vril officers. "We built our ships to be perfect, and when that perfection failed, we had no alternatives. The humans built expecting failure, preparing for it. They embraced chaos while we denied its existence." Nax gestured to the human devices. "We will learn from them, as they learn from us. The next generation of Vril ships will incorporate redundancies. Our officers will study human history, human adaptability." As he spoke, a human delegation entered the chamber, led by a familiar face. "Captain Moore," Nax greeted. "Or should I say, Admiral Moore now." Jack nodded. "Admiral Nax, I see your technicians are having fun with our primitive equipment." "We are learning that different approaches have different values," Nax replied. "Perhaps perfection is not found in flawless execution, but in the ability to continue despite flaws." As the two former enemies discussed the future, their ships orbited peacefully in the space above. Different designs, different philosophies, but each now incorporating lessons learned from the other. The war that began with mockery had ended with mutual respect, and with the understanding that true strategy meant adapting not just to the enemy, but to oneself.